So with no further ado, I will get straight onto our speakers and make the most of the time that we have together. So I'd like to introduce you to the lovely Sammy Ainsworth, who is an amazing lady, like lots of us here, wearing many, many hats, and she's going to be sharing some reflections on her family's journey. So Sammy is a trustee at Lupus UK. She's also working at Alder Children's Hospital, helping children and families access research there. And she's also the chair of RAISE, which is a charity working in education about representing families with invisible illnesses. And RAISE is a very special charity to Sammy because it was actually set up by her daughter, who was diagnosed with lupus at the age of 14. So Sammy's got a wealth of life experience to share with you, and I'm really excited to hear what she's got to say for us this evening. Over to you, Sammy.
Thank you, Emily. That's really kind. So I just wanted to really come and talk a little bit about my experience, because it's been 10 years since my daughter Sophie was diagnosed with lupus, and it's most definitely been an up and down journey, and continues to be to this day. And I suppose that's the first thing I wanted to say, that, you know, things can sometimes look all right and you think that everything's great, but things can be very up and down, and it's great to know that, you know, we are all in this together, and we have all hopefully got each other's support. And so yeah, so Sophie's diagnosis, she was diagnosed at 14, as Emily's mentioned. We were lucky; it was quite a short time frame for lupus. She'd been diagnosed within about 6 or 7 months. That's not always the case. So lupus is systemic, and in Sophie's case, that was affecting her lungs, it was affecting her joints, and it was affecting her muscles. She also ended up having lots of heart tests and things like that. And before long, we were having cameras up and cameras down, because all the medication was sort of messing up lots within a young body. But also psychologically, the impact of having the diagnosis was very, very hard on Sophie. She went from being a very relatively healthy young girl to suddenly not, and the not was going to last forever. So as a family, things can often be quite tough, and ours was no different, in that different parents handle things in different ways. I took on the role of being sort of the support, being the mother lion type, and basically trying to make everything better. I learned very quickly that actually, that although I could support and although I could be with her, I did have limits, and that I did realise that I wasn't able, you know, I've eventually realised that I wasn't able to take lupus away. But for 2 years, I tried my best. And basically, by the end of that 2 years of many, many hospital stays, many visits, many different departments, I think we whizzed through so many departments all day. It became like our second home. And there was 1 month in particular towards the end of the 2 years where Sophie was an inpatient for the best part of a month. And it was incredibly, incredibly exhausting, not just for Sophie. Obviously, it was huge for Sophie. But from my perspective, I'd sort of come to the end of my tether. For 2 years, I've tried to be the strong one. I tried to make everybody better, well, in life, just in general. But I'd tried my absolute hardest with my daughter, and I had also almost forgotten about looking after myself. So she came out of hospital after a month. She was doing better. And I sort of walked through the door and literally just crashed. My body couldn't take any more. My brain couldn't take any more. My head and my heart definitely couldn't take any more. And it was tough, because sometimes you know, it's quite hard to find support sometimes, and I definitely did find it a struggle. Luckily, I had a fantastic GP, and I knew very quickly that I needed to go and see that GP. I knew that this was actually a little bit more important. That was something I could try and fix myself. I needed specialist help. So I went to see the GP, and I was again very lucky that I got in to see a counsellor and a psychologist, and it was the best thing that happened, because very slowly, after quite a few months, they put me back together. But they put all the pieces back together, but they taught me lots. They taught me lots about how I needed to actually take a little time to step back and to put myself in the best position I could be to support my daughter. And that was to make sure that I was giving time for myself. So it did take a long time, but slowly I learned that with the help of a counsellor, with the help of sort of a team that I'd built, one of the things that I would give anything to not be sitting here tonight, and I mean that in the best possible way. I'd give anything not to know what lupus was or any rheumatic diseases are, but that's not the hand my family's been dealt. But what I did learn was that the support from other parents is just so amazing and so valuable. And some of the people that I've worked with on this project and beyond are just now lifelong friends, and will always will be. and I learnt on people that I learned along and got to know along the way. And I also learnt on a few close friends that, you know, were just previous close friends. I learnt very quickly that maybe oversharing can sometimes bring its own stresses. And if you talk to everybody about how you're feeling or how Sophie's feeling, it can sometimes make things just worse, and that some people are better listeners than others, as we know in life. So I learned who was going to be my team, who was going to be sort of team Sammy to sort of support me, really push for Sophie. And I feel that that's really helped. We're now sort of 8 years beyond that, and Sophie's been through a very tough time at times, but she's also been through periods of things where things have been nice and relaxed. But I've always the biggest thing that I think I've learned is to just not take my eye off the ball, and to realize and to try and recognize when I think she might be having a little bit of a wobble, but also crucially me myself. The best thing I ever did was get my dog, and one of the best therapies I have is to go out and get into the fresh air and to just be on my own with my dog and just breathe. She's probably going to make an appearance at some point, because she usually does on Zoom and Teams meetings. But I think just relaxing, trying to find a little bit of time to relax. And I know it's so hard, and that's easier said than done. I know that. But to try and find a little bit of time for you has really helped me. What has massively helped me is getting involved. As Emily said, I'm a trustee for Lupus UK, and I love that charity. And I'm also a trustee for a small charity that we set up as a family. I've got involved, I had a complete career change, that's a different story. But getting involved and sort of learning more about my daughter's condition has definitely helped me to help her as well. I suppose that what I really want to say is it's not one size fits all. There's not anybody that can tell you how it's going to be and that will work perfectly for you, because what's worked perfectly for me might not work for somebody else. But the biggest thing I would say is to reach out to the charities, because the charities really do care. Reach out to the charities, reach out to the specialist nurses in your centre, reach out to the close friends or family that hopefully we've all got somebody, and just try and take time for you. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say really, but to realise that, just the final to say that it doesn't matter whether your child has been diagnosed recently and they're 8, or whether they're 24 and now finding their way in the world. It's still hard for everybody, but the support that we slowly build around us, to me, is absolutely priceless. And I'm here for anybody with lupus. I hope that some of the people who are joining us on this call know that I'm very involved in the parental support side, but I know that so many of our other wonderful charities are there as well. And I wish you well, and I really hope, I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the other speakers. And I think that's about it from me, Emily. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sammy. That's a fantastic insight and very personal and honest about your journey. I think probably everybody on this call has got a journey of their own, and it doesn't really matter on this call whether you're at the start of your journey or well wading through the middle of it, if you're in one of those calmer patches that Sammy's just described so well, or if you're really in the throes of it at the moment. But yes, as Sammy said, the charities really are here for you, and I know, I speak from experience, and I say you do find the right people that can listen, and not everybody gets it, but you need to find people who do get it, because there are lots out there, and we can help point you in the right direction of other families living near you if that will be helpful. So thank you so much, Sammy. That was really brilliant to hear from you. We're going to move to the second part of our evening now, where we're going to hear from 2 fantastic psychologists who are obviously experts in their field. I'd really like to introduce you to Dr. Declan Jordan, who is a clinical psychologist working at Alder Children's NHS Foundation Trust. We're so pleased to have you with us this evening, Declan. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I'd also like to introduce you to Dr. Alex Orchard. Alex, I know, is having some issues this evening, so I don't actually know if she's on the call yet, but just for when she will be, she's the lead clinical psychologist who works within Paediatric Rheumatology and Chronic Pain at the Evelina Children's Hospital. So some of you on the call who are at the Evelina or Alderham may recognise these 2 fantastic people and may even have met them in the past. But if not, it doesn't matter which hospital you're seen at, I'm sure they'll have some words of wisdom for us, and we're so thrilled to have them with us this evening. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that was a lovely introduction, and I'm very grateful to have been asked to do this. So I'm going to cross my fingers for technology and try and share my screen. So you should hopefully, if anybody can confirm that they can see that, Emily, I can see you. Is my screen sharing okay? Sorry, Emily, you're on mute. I'll just in case you said something.
Sorry, yeah, we can see the slides. You might just want to pop them on the view where we don't see the little ones down the side. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Thank you.
They are right. I shall start the presentation, and thank you everybody in advance for listening.
Before I go on to provide a brief overview of our aims and objectives for the presentation this evening, I just wanted to make
Declan, I think we've lost your sound there.
Just bear with me 1 second. Can you hear me speaking? No.
Yeah.
I should explain to everybody I'm struggling a bit with, excuse me, my asthma at the minute. So I thought it would be a good idea to pre-record this so you don't hear me coughing and spluttering through it. But
reference to the value we place on different perspectives and acknowledge the expertise. Before I go on to provide a brief overview of our aims and objectives for the presentation this evening, I just wanted to make reference to the value we place on different perspectives and acknowledge the expertise of children and young people and the people around them, particularly their parents and carers. From our position as psychologists, it's really impossible to instill any change or make progress without the engagement of children and young people we work with and the support provided by the people around them. So on to our aims and objectives. We're going to start by thinking about ideas related to adjustment, acceptance, and the importance of self-care. Before moving on to thinking about supporting children and young people to develop a healthy self-image, we're going to think about ways in which we can manage difference, how we can grow life around a physical health condition. Then we're going to think about ways in which we can support the management of procedural distress, and then have a little think about the importance of understanding, expressing, and responding to thoughts, feelings, and emotions. We're going to think about the development of some mindfulness and relaxation strategies, providing some resources around that, before finally moving on to some resources related to getting better sleep and the rest and recovery that we all need, but particularly children and young people as they're growing and moving through different stages of development. Working together as a team. Now, we know that the best method of care provision for children and young people managing a long-term medical condition is by a team that includes a range of professionals. Each of those professionals will bring their own expertise in a specific area and work together in a joined up way so that people can benefit from their individual skills and knowledge. Parents and carers are key to this way of working, acting like a bridge between the child or young person and the team or services around them. You're the expert on your child, and the knowledge, skills, and emotional and practical support you provide is absolutely vital. We understand, though, how hard a job it can be, and whilst managing your own emotional well-being, at times it can feel overwhelming. So support is needed, and we wanted to reflect on some common themes and share ideas that we, in our work with children and young people and their families, have found to be helpful. We recognise that it takes time for any child or young person and those around them to adjust to being diagnosed with a medical condition. Often, with very little warning, you are required to absorb complex medical information and then relay that to friends and family who are also trying to understand. As a parent or caregiver, there's a natural drive to protect your children in any way you can to minimise their distress. However, a health condition can feel like something that, at least at first, lies outside of your control. It's a process that requires continual readjustments and an ongoing recalibration, not simply in terms of knowledge of the medical condition itself and how it may impact on your child's health, but also in relation to what your role might be, what the implications are for day-to-day life, and how a child or young person can be best supported. When we talk about acceptance, and the development of acceptance around a health condition. It can sound like a tricky term, but we're not talking about giving up or passive recognition. Rather, it's about allowing what's there to be there and trying to foster a different relationship with it, a relationship that allows you to move forward and focus your attention and energy onto maximizing quality of life and supporting a child or young person to live as effectively as possible around their condition. It's perfectly normal to at times feel swept along by a range of emotions and to seesaw between worries that the diagnosis will limit your child's opportunities and feeling optimistic they will achieve their ambitions. Taking care of yourself and your own well-being is key. Now, we know that for better or for worse, children and young people take their cue from the people around them. This means that the approach you take towards the impact of the physical health condition on your child will influence their beliefs about themselves and their condition. They will learn from you how to approach any challenges they experience and will benefit from the knowledge and skills you have gained. Although we recognise it can be tricky, subtle changes in the language we use can be really important. Try where possible to avoid negative sounding language or terms like "you have something wrong with you" or "disease." Try not to refer to treatments as being for illness, but rather as a way of helping your child to keep fit and well. Now, some brief ideas on supporting a child or young person to develop and maintain a healthy self-image. We want to enable any child or young person managing a physical health condition to develop a healthy self-image as they grow, without perceiving themselves to be unnecessarily limited. We want to support children and young people not to merely cope, but thrive. And we want to support children and young people to discover their potential, recognise their strengths, and encourage resilience so they're able to set themselves goals and ambitions in the same way that their peers do, despite any health needs or challenges. Ways in which you can support with this building of confidence and a sense of competence are by praising a young person's strengths and supporting and seeking out any opportunities to help build upon them. Although tricky, avoiding comparisons with siblings or other children can be helpful, as can engage in activities together as a family, thinking about doing things that everybody can join in. Also important, we find, is encouraging children and young people to take an active part in decision making, which raises their sense of control and personal agency. Supporting children and young people to manage a sense of difference. Now, as children and young people move through different stages of their development, they become more aware of any potential differences between themselves and peers. Understandably, this can at times lead to a sense of unfairness or hardship, particularly if they feel unable to engage in preferred activities, spend the time they wish to with friends, struggle with different aspects of treatment, and face disruption to school or their ambitions. Whilst it's a normal progression, it can at times be challenging, and difficult questions might arise as children and young people strive to make sense of their condition, its potential implications or trajectory. And you won't always have the answers, and nor should you be expected to. What you can seek to be, though, is a supportive presence, somebody who is willing to listen and with whom the child and young person you're supporting feels safe to express their emotions to. Supporting a child or young person in growing life around a physical health condition. Now, we know that from the work we do with lots of children and young people and their families, that living with a chronic health condition can at times make life feel like it's shrunk. Difficulties with day-to-day health, pain, discomfort, fatigue, treatment needs, and hospital appointments, etc., can limit how much children and young people feel able to engage in their preferred activities, access school on a regular basis, or spend time with friends. When this has happened, we want to support children and young people to reconnect with what feels most important to them and start to grow life again wherever possible. The image shown is one I use quite often in my work with children and young people to try and get across the idea that whilst unfortunately the health condition itself may not be something that we can always have the degree of control we'd like over, what we can do where possible is try and control what we do around the condition so that relative impact of it in our life can be managed. During those times when life feels like it has shrunk, what often happens is we've kind of, due to the emotional distress or physical discomfort we're experiencing, we've lost connection with our kind of values and what's important to us. So in order to kind of redress that balance, often it can be helpful to work with children and young people to identify and reconnect with those values. Now, unlike goals, values are not something we ever achieve or accomplish. Rather than being an endpoint, they are more of a direction of travel. So they provide guidance and help give our lives a sense of meaning. In the same way a compass works, values can act as a guide. They can help us to make choices based on the directions we want our lives to go in. Values are who we want to be and what we want our lives to be about. When we connect with our values, we are then able to move our lives in meaningful directions, even in the face of difficult or painful experiences. The sense of reconnection to our values and what's most important to us in life can help provide a sense of purpose and motivation. It can give children and young people the strength and courage to persist. Through difficult moments or periods of their life. It can also provide them with a sense of fulfillment as they are able to reflect on their days and think about how they lived or spent their time as they wished to. Moments where they actively chose to respond in a particular way, as opposed to just being swept along by unhelpful thoughts or feelings. Now, there are a range of values-based exercises that as psychologists we can use in our work with children and young people. One of them is getting a child or young person as a means of identifying their core values, is getting them to think about somebody they respect and admire. This could be somebody they know personally, a fictional character, a famous sports person or musician, or a historical or cultural figure. We'd encourage the young person to think about what most they admire or respect about that person. What do they like about their personal qualities or personality? What draws them to that person? What do they think they're like as a person? How do they treat other people? What is it they stand for? And then asking them to think about if they had to choose 3 words to describe their best attributes, what would those words be? Are there any qualities they recognise in this person that feel important to them and they would like to bring into their own lives? Another idea can be using a checklist such as the one shown to play a game of values bingo, looking through the different options, marking which ones feel important and then kind of thinking about why they feel important to them. Is acceptance important to them? Is creativity something that drives them? Is a sense of fun or generosity or gratitude or equality? Is finding challenges and seeking out opportunities? Is freedom important to them? Or ideas around compassion or fairness, humour, fitness and kind of physical engagement and activity might be important, as maybe a sense of independence or justice or self-control or self-development. At the end of the game or challenge, a child or young person should have identified maybe around 5 key values that are really important to them. So they can work through the checklist, identify ones that initially stand out, and then work to narrow those down to the ones that are most important to them. Once we've identified and pulled together that list of core values, what do we do with them? Well, we can use something called the choice point, which is a kind of visual representation of, in life we often get kind of swept along by different thoughts and feelings, and what can be really helpful is having something to to think about that makes us conscious of the decisions we're making. So once we've identified a particular value, we can then think whether a particular action or behavior or situation is something that is moving us away from that particular value or towards it. Now, away moves tends to be ineffective actions that are inconsistent with our key values, actions that move us away from the person we want to be or the life we would ideally like to build. And then towards moves are actions that move us towards the life we want to live. We are acting effectively and behaving like the sort of person we want to be. The choice point is a helpful tool in that it helps people to emphasize the power that they all have in making meaningful choices and influencing their lives in a positive way. It helps them move away from, as I say, being swept up by unconscious choices that we're not really thinking about or engaged in. Stepping back at times and thinking, I have a choice in what I do here, and whether it's aligned to what's important to me or whether it moves me away from that. Yes, of course, there are times in our lives when it might be easier to make these kind of decisions than others, and it may feel like some people have smoother roads than others. Ultimately, though, we get to choose what feels important to us, our own style, and then do what we can to act in accordance with that. When life is easy, giving us what we want, it's usually straightforward for us to choose towards moves, to act effectively, treat ourselves and others the way we want to, do the things that make life better in the long term rather than worse. At other times, though, it can feel more challenging, and when something tries to pull us down, a little harder just to shake it off. Keeping a daily diary or journal can be helpful in lots of different ways. It can help us process our emotions or spend some time reflecting on the day that's passed or thinking about what we'd like to do in the days to come. In respect of values, though, it can be really helpful for a child or young person to keep some kind of diary or record when they can regularly make notes of moments where they made a conscious choice to act in line with their values, when there was an option to do otherwise. Times when they made a conscious effort to do something despite that sense of worry or fear or emotional or physical discomfort. And it also gives an opportunity to reflect on what they gained as a result of that choice.
Thanks ever so much, Declan. So Declan's kindly going to continue sharing slides. My name's Alex and I'm a psychologist working in rheumatology for a number of years now at Evelina London Children's Hospital. I guess one of the things we come across a lot for young people and families living with JIA and lupus and other rheumatological conditions is procedural distress, whether that be taking medication on a daily or weekly basis, whether that be coming into hospital for scans. And I guess just to start to think about the fact that it's quite normal to experience anxiety when we're faced with a situation or an object that might cause fear, whether that's a scanner or a methotrexate contraption. And often to think about the fact that the experience of anxiety might not align with the actual danger of the situation. That's again quite normal. It might be past unpleasant experiences or our worries about what might happen that's going to drive that anxiety. It's not a rational response, it's an emotional response. And I guess it requires an emotional connection, usually from caregivers, to kind of, I guess, come down on the young person's level and support them with that. But also, I guess, as kind of the young adults who've joined us today, thinking about who your support networks are, who are around you, who might be able to think with you about how to manage some of that. Not everyone needs to see a psychologist. Actually, a lot of great work is already done by the teams that you're seeing, the charities who are here today providing this kind of support. There's a lot of things out there that we can do to start, I guess, ameliorating the effects. So just thinking about the fact that previous experiences can lead to something called anticipatory anxiety, so before something happens. And the key there is about trying to get an early positive experience. But if that hasn't happened, we're trying to reduce the time. So anxiety loves time, it loves to grow over time. If we get less time to grow, it's a bit easier to manage. And just thinking about balancing how much choice a young person has in the moment of what's happening, with having already given them a structure and a plan of what's happening. So particularly for younger children, they might benefit from having something like a visual timetable, coming up with that with you, decorating it. May all go out the window in the moment, but actually if you're practicing those visual timetables, if you're doing things like role play and telling stories over time, you're going to see that that might become a little bit easier for the young person in your life to manage. Can we move on to the next slide? Thank you. So just thinking about the way that we talk about injections, etc., be quite a usual thing to say, you know, this medicine will burn, or I'm sorry, or this might hurt. That's setting up the young person in your life to expect pain and difficulty. So we might say things like, some children say they have warm feelings instead of saying, I'm sorry, you're doing so well. And you may feel something if you can help your body stay comfortable by using special breathing that you've learned. It's just thinking about the language that we use day to day, and that we're reframing that language to be, I guess, less scary without kind of lying about it. Really good techniques when we're having something unpleasant done to us, distraction. So particularly, I guess, for parents, perhaps sussing out beforehand what might be the distraction tools that your child likes, and maybe having those in a box available, having 2 or 3 of those available at the time of an injection or medicine as a way of supporting that. Or particularly if you're having blood tests in a hospital, having a favourite teddy bear available or some other object can be really, really helpful. And young people might just need you to be leading that. So having a few tricks up your sleeve, and maybe actually the first couple of times you go, having both of you there to support one another, or having role played it between yourselves about what you're going to do. Well, if they say this, what can I say in response? Trying to talk in a relaxed way, fake it till you make it on this one. Everyone's anxious for the first time, second time, third time, however many times. If you had a bad experience and you can be more worried about it, as parents, if you can fake it till you make it, it's going to make a huge difference to how your child responds, because actually they model and they mirror what you give them back, as I'm sure you've noticed. And again, the little low-key distractions, things like fidget toys, they're great. Having something to twirl with your fingers. Some kids like to just kind of play with their hair. Any of those sorts of things, keeping hands and minds busy. Thinking about what you can say. I think this is a big one for families, because it's sort of like having a health condition come up knocks off your parenting. You may have noticed that you think you've nailed it, and then suddenly they get 6 months older and all goes out the window and you've got to start again. That's kind of the same with JI, lupus, and all those other rheumatological conditions. At different stages in their development, they're going to need different ways of talking about things. So just kind of thinking about, how do you talk about other things in your life in an age-appropriate way? What sort of language are you using? And transporting that into how you might talk about that rheumatological condition, the procedure, the treatment. In general, the younger your child is, the less notice you want to be giving them. I think that we've got that further on in our slides. So we're kind of talking about it kind of immediately before something. Older children need a bit of time to plan and think and manage to cope. Probably the worst thing you can do is on a regular basis spring unpleasant things on your child, because that just leads to generalized anxiety about pretty much anything you do. So it's a balancing act. Being open with your child about why the procedure is taking place, what will happen, how it will feel, or how you think it might feel. If you don't have that information, it's okay to quiz the healthcare professionals. That is absolutely fine. They're kind of talking about this procedure that seems very straightforward to them. It's fine for you to say, well, okay, when do I have to go into hospital? How long do they have to fast for? How does this work? When will I find out that? How will this work? And expect in a hospital setting, you're going to have to wait. So bring your distractions, bring your things that they might enjoy to do. Talking about how things are going to be supported and managed, and thinking about how your young person wants to respond to discomfort. So the older young people get, the more able they are to talk about that with you. Using humour to talk about things unrelated to the procedure. So what will you be doing later, etc. What is there to look forward to? So I guess that some of you will come across play specialists, but things like toys, bubbles, dummies, singing, directing a like infants' attention to something in the environment that would be of interest to them. For toddlers, again, toys, bubbles, pop-up books, songs, party blowers, singing, anything that directs their attention to the environment that might be interesting or fun. And then thinking about kind of for school ages, what are the toys and stories, the videos, the books, the jokes, the counting. That's the sort of time when often you'll find resources kind of on the internet, particularly from the charities that are aimed at more school age children. And for adolescents, that might be a time when screen time's absolutely fine. Get the video games out, get the books out, get the music out, get the headphones out. What is it that relaxes them, that makes them feel okay in that moment? Just some ideas. So understanding and talking about our feelings and emotions. I think different families have different relationship to this, and to a certain extent, having a health condition can push that a bit. It might make it more or less likely that you're going to talk about emotions, but it's really important that young people learn to express how they feel about these things, that they find a language for their feelings and emotions, and that they have opportunities to do that. Might be within the family, it might be with friends, it might be with healthcare professionals. There's lots of ways of doing that. It might be a journal, it might be notes on their phone, it might be voice memos. Just finding a way to support them with that. So emotional coaching, there's a really great resource called All Emotions Are Okay. I can't take credit, Declan found this one. But it's a really helpful way, I guess, to sit down together with your family and think about feelings and emotions, how you might talk about it, particularly how you model it. You can tell your kids to blue in the face, but actually you'll find in years to come that they are parroting back all that stuff that you said that you maybe thought they weren't listening to. They were taking it all in, just not that consciously necessarily. And I guess accepting your child's emotions, it can be really hard when we're kind of overworked or we're stressed ourselves and young people are kind of expressing large emotions. We can really want to shut that down, and actually, particularly having a rheumatological condition, but generally I think in life, if we can be open to those experiences of emotion, and we're not asking young people not to feel something, we might be asking them to express it differently, but their feelings are just going to come up. We can't control our feelings. We can only control or have some hope of having a way of reacting to them in a different way, where we're still talking through our slides. We want to make sure we get to your questions at the end. Shall we move on to the next one? We're going to talk about kind of ways of doing that. So the blob tree and kind of emotional games. Again, Declan's great ideas, not mine. But it's kind of, this is like a great thing to look at for young people. Which blob person do they actually relate to? What kind of do they think that person's feeling that they might then be able to talk about? As adults, we may or may not be quite used to talking about things without many prompts. Young people, children, they need those prompts. They're more likely to have a conversation with you in a car when they're not looking directly at you. They're more likely to have these sorts of conversations when there's an aid for it. So the blob tree is one idea for that. And then another one, this is kind of an emotions thing, so you can use it like a game, kind of rolling a dice, moving on to the next one, talking about a time when you were angry, surprised, sad. If it feels too much for you to talk about yourself, you might kind of nominate another family member to do it with, but just kind of getting those emotions started, talking about them, thinking about where they happen in people's bodies, how people react to them, and not doing that in a kind of judgmental, you need to do it differently way, just exploring what the experience of that is. And you'll often find if you can sit more quietly and listen to each other, there's a lot to be learned from those sorts of conversations. Was there anything you'd add to that, Declan, before we move on?
No, I think you've covered that all, Alex. Thank you.
Great. And I guess kind of about learning to express emotions, remembering they're all temporary. They're constantly changing. When we feel miserable, when we feel sad, when we feel angry, it feels like it will never end. It does end. It's not possible for you to stay in a constant emotional state for days at a time. And just remembering that that can happen. So we might think about people having clouds of emotions. We might think about them kind of floating past in the sky and coming back again, perhaps more often. Perhaps in winter we see more rain than we do anything else, but it does pass. It's not there all of the time. So things come and go. And I guess feeding into that is the kind of ideas that we might have some days where we feel better than others. We can't control the feelings that we have, but they don't last and they are temporary. So I think these are some really nice visuals to think about that with. This is where mindfulness comes in. So some of you might have heard this banded about. It's not relaxation. It is about noticing the fact that we have emotions. We have things that come up for us. We connect to them. We think about ourselves in the present moment. And then we decide whether or not we want to react in a particular way to those emotions. So we might be looking at just kind of noticing and letting go of that emotion, or we might be looking at noticing that emotion and connecting to it and perhaps doing something along those lines. Regularly practicing mindfulness with some of these tips that we have can really help improve our attention. It can help improve our focus. It can reduce stress and anxiety. It can aid relaxation. It can improve sleep. It can be really helpful. I think the caveat to that is mindfulness connects you to how you're feeling right now. So if you're feeling pretty rubbish and you're really good at distracting yourself, actually it might just connect you to the fact that you're not feeling great. Okay, let's go through. I think we're going to send these slides on, aren't we, afterwards? Yeah, so just an introduction. These are some meditations you can find online. Training Our Monkey Minds, The Slow and Steady Elephant, How to Meditate, a Beginner's Guide. I'm not going to go through all of them because otherwise you'll all be here till gone past your bedtimes. Leaves on a Stream is a really nice one that's just about kind of noticing thoughts that come and then letting them go. It's a really good practice, really helpful for things like sleep where we can have lots of thoughts running through our minds. And then we've got the heartbeat one as well, don't we? It's almost like a bit of gentle yoga in it. Another method you can use anywhere is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's the different senses, 5 things that you can see, 5 things that you can hear, etc. That can literally be done anywhere in a room. Sleep, another really big one that I think people can find gets affected by having pain in your life, by having worries in your life, perhaps in addition. And just generally this time of year is full of sleep difficulties with people having exams, etc. Just to say that sleep is really important. It helps regulate our metabolic system, balance our emotions, restore our perspective, help us with negative feelings, cleanses toxins and proteins that build up in our brains, strengthens and consolidates secure memories, stores new information we've learned during the day, boosts creativity, supports growth and aids recovery, and integrates new pieces of information that were already stored in our minds, and particularly for our young people at school where that's happening. There are various resources out there, and there are times when our internal clocks can be knocked off. So this particular time of year, with it being very light, can make it quite hard to sleep. Pain and discomfort has an impact. And I guess that idea of switching off, that's where things like the mindfulness tools or the relaxation strategies come in. And it's just about kind of realigning us with our natural wake and sleep rhythms. Trying to get into a routine has a really big impact on our ability to be able to sleep. So there's quite a few resources out there, which I think, again, we'll send on. But it is around a bit of sleep hygiene, is around how to manage the evenings, conversations with your teenagers or indeed tweens about turning off technology. Not very straightforward, but important. Things about the right environment, nap environments, that sort of thing. But I think you probably heard enough of us talking at you, so we'll stop there.
Wow, thank you so much, both of you, for those amazing insights and slides. I literally feel like I've been on a 3-day course of how to deal with my daughter now. I'm making notes here, but actually nobody needs to worry if they've written nothing down and they've just been listening, because we will be sending all that information out. And we're so grateful. We are short on time. We've got a little bit of time. I would like to go to some of the questions that we came in before the webinar, because I think there's lots of common ground there. So if it's okay with you, that we had lots of questions about schools. So do you have any advice for sort of supporting wellbeing? Particularly, I think the most common thing is that transition from primary to secondary school if you've got JIA or another rheumatic condition. Any top tips on that, please?
And I think I have lots of discussions, and I'm sure Alex does too, with people making that transition. I think what's really important to balance is the need to provide information to the school about what will be helpful and how a young person could be supported, but balancing that with their kind of right to individual privacy and the recognition that they may not want everybody at that school or everybody around them to be aware of their condition. Often for young people, it's a new start as well, where they're meeting new people, making new friends, hopefully, and it's balancing what information they provide. And I guess at that age, giving them a sense of control and agency about what information is shared. And then there's lots of practical things we can do as well, kind of support from OT. And I know one of the biggest fears the young people I work with speak about is getting lost and the building being too big. And when there's physical challenges and mobility issues, I guess that exacerbates that fear. So planning is really important. And I think what's been key for some of the young people I worked with who've made the most successful transitions is having a key figure in school that perhaps knows a little bit more about their situation than other people do, but understands they want to keep aspects of it private, but they know that there's someone that they can go to and during periods of need and when feelings perhaps are a bit more intense. I don't know what you think as well, Alex.
Yeah, I'd say definitely the kind of OT physios and nurses in our team do a lot of this work and thinking about it. Secondary school is an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And so I think a lot of young people don't actually want to share a lot about their health condition, which I don't think you have to. It is about school knowing what kind of adjustments they need to make and what that might look like. And if something comes up, like what does the young person need to go and say? Who do they need to go and speak to? You don't necessarily have to tell people everything to end up having a phone call to your parents if that's what's needed. But I think even just seeing the landscape of what a new school looks like can be really important, particularly if there's a flare going on and you're needing to do more walking than perhaps you had before, because often primary schools are on much smaller grounds, people aren't having to move around. That can be really difficult for a young person to conceptualise what they need, and parents, before they get there. But I do think if you can meet with the kind of Senko and you are willing to have some conversations, that can be quite helpful. And assuming that someone knows what kind of your health condition is and what it means for you, they probably don't. And even if the medic writes a letter and says it, it's not going to have what does that mean for your young person on a day-to-day basis.
That's really helpful, thank you. And obviously we will signpost all the charity resources and education, because each of our charities has lots and lots of useful bits and pieces. And we did have lots of questions around sort of pain management. Obviously everybody knows what medications they've been prescribed, but do you have any top tips over and above sort of medications?
I think the kind of our team definitely talks about self-management, and it's not all about the medications. It is about how much activity you're doing. It is about how quickly you can manage a flare, and also pain is not just medical. It is, if you have a sense of threat from anywhere in your environment, actually that's going to amplify your pain, whether it's kind of internally how you're feeling, whether it's how your friends are talking to you, whether it's what teachers are doing. Any sense of threat in your environment is going to increase your sense of pain. So actually knowing your ways of self-soothing, knowing your kind of relaxation strategies, whether it's kind of going to bed and putting a hot water bottle on when you're at school, actually what are your options available to you? Can you do some progressive muscle relaxation? I think those things are really important, and how parents respond to that can also be really important. Some young people need a bit of kind of jollying along. Other young people actually really need you to listen to how rubbish this is and how much it sucks. And that in itself is going to be really helpful. And it's knowing when your child needs to offload to you versus when they need you to help them fix things would be my kind of thoughts. I don't know, Declan, what your thoughts might be.
No, very similar, I think, Alex. I think relaxation is really, really important, helping young people to develop those skills around kind of when they're feeling that stress response or that central nervous system response that's amplifying those pain signals, finding a way to counteract that and feel a greater sense of control. And breathwork practices and relaxation practices help to kind of relax tense muscles, focus your attention on a particular thing, act as distraction, and they also release kind of endorphins that are kind of the body's natural painkillers. So that can be really helpful, I think.
Fab, thank you. I think we can squeeze in one more. People have been asking about really how do you approach the issue of mental health if you have JIA? Perhaps how do you approach the subject with healthcare professionals, particularly perhaps if they haven't ever mentioned anything about mental health support? Obviously in the hospitals where you work, they've got you fabulous people, but what about in other centres? What's the best way if you don't necessarily feel your team have got that on the menu for you?
I think, but as you say, both Alex and I are really fortunate, and we work within organisations and services where that's a real focus, and the consultants are very psychologically minded and really in tune and understand that mind-body connection, that we can't separate emotional health and well-being and physical health and well-being. They're intrinsically linked. So we're lucky in that respect, but I understand that not everybody's that fortunate. I think using the resources that are available and the support that charities such as those involved today provide, and the links they provide to, because just searching for information can feel very overwhelming. So if somebody can sift through that information and use their expertise and their experience of what's worked for other people and young people and their families, that's really helpful and can limit that sense of overwhelm.
And I guess kind of to build on that, I'm aware of time, but also I think that is important. The psychologist who works in rheumatology is not the only some emotional wellbeing support. Actually, I get very few referrals comparatively to the number of young people that are supported by my physio, OT, nursing and consultant colleagues, in terms of just their ability to provide the sort of information that's needed around the health condition to support general anxiety, which is understandable. I think understanding what's going on in your body can go a really long way to supporting you. There's also kind of support in places like schools. There's often kind of school counsellors available. The kind of mythical CAMS beast that people talk about actually isn't always the holy grail. Sometimes there's kind of what they call tier 2 support that's available that people can self-refer to in their area. I cannot tell you the number of people I've been told GPs have said, you won't get into CAMS. And I'm like, well, have you made a referral? Because actually they are going to get into CAMS. There's a kind of myth that it's not available and it's not around, and there are different places to get it. And I think how you are supported by healthcare professionals, whether you feel able to ask any questions about anything, that's going to help you. And just ask. It's all right to ask. You might not want to do it whilst your young person is there. You might want to do it on a kind of phone call to the nursing team when they're at school. Because actually it might be you who's more worried than the young person is. But you have license to ask those questions, and if they don't have it available, they should know what else is available. And if not them, then the GP and the charities are amazing. We're really lucky with rheumatological conditions that that's available.
Oh, thank you so much. I think that message of just ask is about the most sort of important takeaway from this evening. Doesn't really matter who you ask, whether it's a friend or family member, if it's part of your healthcare team, if it's one of us charities, just ask and there will be help out there. And you may need to ask a couple of times, unfortunately, but keep asking until you get what you need for yourself and your family. I think we're probably, sadly, with time, going to have to leave it there, but I wanted to say a huge, huge thank you to all our amazing speakers this evening, and thank you to all of you for tuning in and listening with us. We will be hopefully sending out the slides and the resources that we've got early next week, once we've sorted out all our technical stuff. And we'd also be really delighted if you'd be so kind as to fill in an evaluation for us, because we'd really love to know what you thought of this event. If people have enjoyed it and felt it's beneficial, then we would like to run some more, but really we're in your hands. We'd like to know what you would like to hear. And do check in with us. We will send you out all the charity links. We won't keep personal information after this call, so if you need to reach out to the charities, please do, and we'll send you all the information to do that. And importantly, if you have any pressing concerns after this evening, please get in touch with somebody. We'll also signpost other mental health charities if things are a bit more serious. We need to make sure that you're looked after, whatever it is, the needs that you're having at this time. So we'd like, on behalf of all the charities, we'd like to wish you a lovely remainder of your evening. I hope you've been able to get something fabulous out of today, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our charity events that some of us are running in the near future, or keeping in touch with us either online or by phone, however it is that you would like to get in touch with us. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was lovely to have you with us.